Hello, my name's Ellen Forsyth. I work at the State Library of New South Wales, but like many of my colleagues, I'm currently working off-site. Yama, this is welcome in Gamilaroi, the language of the people of the land I grew up on in northern New South Wales. Welcome to this online talk. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which each of us are on and where our libraries stand. I pay respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other First Nations people. I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures and languages across Australia. I also pay my respects to First Nations people in the USA, where our speaker is from. In the comments, please let us know your name, your library, and the name or names of the traditional custodians of the land your library is on. And as well, I acknowledge the contribution that people of many countries have made to this country. Now, a few housekeeping points. Please keep your video and sound muted. This is so the speaker and other participants are not distracted. Ask questions in chat, and while Dr. Radford may not answer them straight away, she will get to them. And if you have a technical question like your sound isn't working, please direct message Kate O'Grady or myself using chat. We're both showing up as PLS1, so one of us will get to help you with your technical things. And you just use the direct message option through chat. And now to our speaker. Some of you may have read the book Conducting the Reference Interview 3rd edition, which is where the idea for this presentation came from. If you've not read it yet, or at least flicked through it, you have a lovely time ahead of you. And if you have read it, this could be the opportunity to read it again. Professor Marie Radford is one of the co-authors of this book, and she is the Chair and Professor of Library and Information Science at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And it is her research and that of her co-authors which makes this book such compelling reading, even as you cringe with some of the examples provided. I'll now hand over to Marie, and I look forward to hearing from her during this presentation. But as I said, please ask your questions in chat, and they'll be seen to.
Okay, hi everyone. It is with great pleasure that I'm with you today. I was interested to see Ellen's sweater, since I know that your winter is starting next week. Our summer is starting next week, so we're just moving from our sweaters into our short sleeve and our blouses and so forth. I want to start by thanking Ellen Forsyth for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you today. And thanks also to Michelle Head, Kelly Woods, and Rachel Carr. They helped me to better understand the challenges that you have all been facing in New South Wales, especially regarding recent events and what's been going on, which has been a lot. You have actually been going through an awful lot, and as have we also in the States. Ellen first reached out to me December 9th to see if myself or Catherine Ross, who she mentioned, would be interested in doing this webinar. So I really jumped on the chance to do it. But certainly lots has happened for sure. And I'm really glad to finally be here to share with you my thoughts about reference service excellence amid these challenging times. I want to also thank all of you who were good enough to complete a short survey that Ellen sent that allowed me to help with creating this presentation and trying to make it the best that it can. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of noise. I don't know if everyone's muted. If you could all mute yourself, I'd appreciate it very much. Oops. There we go. So the title of my talk is Reference Service Excellence Amid Challenging Times. And as Ellen was saying, The study of reference encounter, what I call the reference encounter, has taken up over 20 years of my professional life. I actually started first as a librarian in the schools, K through 8, 4 years, and then high school, we call high school, for 4 years, and then I was an academic librarian for 11 years before I became a professor. So I have a lot of on-ground experience in that way. So, but never have I seen what's going on here. Libraries today, we are in this environment right now of great uncertainty at a time of rapid change. Now, they say that libraries have changed more in the last couple of years than they have in the past 1,000 years. And I think this is really being true over the last 6 months. We have had these unprecedented changes, which have made us, by force, quickly adapt to what's been going on in our environment. And right now we're kind of in a place where we're scratching our heads thinking about what might be coming next. I just read an article in Library Journal that appeared in April 1st, 2020 edition of Library Journal that was called Ramping Up Remote Reference During COVID-19. And it was in the context of campus shutdowns and academic libraries. But there was a quote in that article that I just thought was quite fitting. Libraries have been, quote, forced to up their reference game abruptly. And I think that's a lot of how we're kind of feeling these days. What's changing in our reference environment? Well, we have a lot of different factors that are adding to the complexity and uncertainty of our reference environment. And let me just say that I believe that reference work is one of the most complex jobs that there is in the library, because it's a complexity of dealing not only with a lot of human beings on the front line, if you will, of service, but also in finding out from them what it is they need to know sometimes when they don't know themselves what it is they even know, or they just have some kind of an amorphous idea, or sometimes they've just been sent there. The idea of the imposed query. They have an assignment from school or assignment from work perhaps, and they've been sent and they don't even know that much about the assignment they've been given. All of that kind of stuff adds to this complexity. So what do we have now? What are we facing now? Well, I don't even have, it's like the gorilla in the room, the impact of the COVID-19 virus on what has been happening all over the world, and to libraries in particular. Our libraries have been shut down here since mid-March. I was going to say in my introduction, and I forgot, that you are seeing the version of Marie Radford, if you look in your, looking at me, that has the most hair that I've had in I can't remember when, because I am not allowed to go and get my hair cut yet. But I have an appointment on June 23rd. They're going to open up on the 22nd, and I have an appointment, and I'm very, very excited about that, right? So besides all of the shutdown and so forth, what is also part of that environment? Well, we know we're going to have budget constraints, and here in the States, budgets have been hit very hard by the closures, and the way that our budget system works here in America is that libraries are funded by tax dollars and also by state funds. So what's happening here, because people are out of work, and New Jersey, along with New York State, have been the two hardest hit states as far as unemployment is concerned and the drop in income to the state. And they were getting our income tax, they were getting and also our sales tax. Those things were funding libraries. So there's going to be some problems with that. Technology changes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this a little bit later on too. We've had to make a huge shift in the kind of the technology that we use to do even the most mundane everyday tasks now. We're moving more toward technological solutions because we have had this to separate and isolate ourselves. Time and staffing constraints. We also are operating a lot of places with just minimal staff, or we're not bringing back all the staff yet. I know that a lot of you have returned to work, but not everyone has returned to work. So we're dealing with that. We know also that especially those of you who are public libraries, you're facing a unique challenge from this Library Journal article of April 1 also. This article says that the libraries have had to support these young students that were sent home from school and their parents, as well as what used to be our in-person patrons who have to navigate these remote resources, sometimes for the very first time. While technology has made remote reference easier, this article was stressing that librarians shouldn't make assumptions about access, and we know that there are a lot of people who are unable to access our services or who don't have, they don't have Wi-Fi or don't have the powerful enough computers, and so forth. So also we have this burgeoning kind of sea change that's going from tree books, are the regular books that we always, paper books, to e-books, right? There was an article this Monday in the New York Times that was called "Keeping Your Social Distance Among the Bookshelves." I quote from this article, "One thing many libraries have noticed is changes in the reading patterns of their customers. Libby, which is an e-book lending app for libraries, saw a 51% increase in the checkout of ebooks after the shutdown orders of mid-March. Ramiro Salazar, the president of the Public Libraries Association and the director of San Antonio Public Library System, which is in Texas, by the way, he said that before the pandemic, the demand in his system was about 5-to-1 in favor of paper books. But he doesn't expect that to come back. I quote, "Users are being forced to turn to ebooks," he said. "What we don't know is how many converts we'll have." And so how many people after the shutdown, as the shutdown starts to lift, how many people are going to continue to want ebooks and how many people are going to want paper books, or maybe there's going to be more of a combination. And as people discover the convenience of ebooks and so forth, there might be just a little bit more adoption of that technology. And I was really thrilled that Ellen was telling me that the Conducting the Reference interview book, which I actually have here as the prop, the Conducting the Reference interview book, that you all in New South Wales were able to get permission to have unlimited shares. And so that was one of the things that prompted Ellen to get in contact, and because you all have access to this in unlimited numbers, which previously was unheard of. You would just get a certain amount of numbers of seats, if you will, to be able to look at that book, and now it's really unlimited, which is pretty amazing. So that's one of the ways that some of the ebook publishers have started to respond to the huge surge in demand for ebooks. Now, along with this kind of complexity, we also have a complexity as we start to open up, right? So here we have a couple of shots. I went and gathered some pictures to kind of illustrate my talk tonight about personal protective equipment and plexiglass shields. And I'm not sure how many of you are going to be coming back to places where these kinds of barriers have been erected to protect both the staff and all of the visitors to your libraries. And you can see here that what we have is a number of different ways that libraries have kind of configured, and one's from Michigan, one's from Louisiana. Two of them are from Louisiana. And you can also see that they're all wearing facial protections with the mask. Now, when we are giving service across a service desk, there's been a lot written about the reference desk itself or service desks themselves as a barrier, right? But also think about this now, it's actually this barrier that is between you and the other person. One of the things that I learned in my Blue Jeans meeting with Ellen and the others was that sometimes there can be problems with people being able to hear across this barrier, that the glass actually breaks the sound. The ones that seem to work the best are the or the barriers that actually have a little opening in the bottom, and maybe even some openings on the sides that are so that you don't have sheets of plexiglass that go across a whole service desk. I'm going to show you a picture later on of one that does just that, and I wonder if they can hear anything at all through this plexiglass. The other thing that happens when we're wearing masks is that we have difficulty reading facial expressions. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit later is this idea of approachability, a nonverbal approachability. And one of the things that I found in my research was that when we want to look approachable behind a service desk, one of the things that we want to do is to be able to give direct eye contact, right? When we give direct eye contact, it signals to the person without saying a word, I'm ready to help you. Here I am. So you can think of this when you're across a service desk and you're trying to catch someone's eye so that you know they've seen you. So just looking up is enormously helpful. So the other thing as well as a pleasant facial expression, it's a little bit harder to do that with these kinds of masks on, right? One of the things that we can do is the eyebrow flash. That looks like you just kind of raise your eyebrows when somebody comes near. You can't even see hardly because of my bangs, but if I push them up, you know, there's the kind of, you know, where you raise your eyebrows, and that can also trigger that kind of a response of people that they see that you are acknowledging their presence. I think it's really hard to detect a smile, but I think in figure 1.1, the woman to the right is definitely smiling underneath that mask, and I can tell by the way that her eyes are crinkled up. So these are some of the little clues that we're going to have to use to see if we can be more approachable. Also, just one more thing about the mask: a friendly color or a pattern is better than just a black, facial covering. I don't know what kind that you've all been using. I hear that these are in short supply, perhaps, after the fires that you endured. But if you have a mask, it's better if it is a more colorful, it's more inviting, as you can see by some of the ones that are being worn in this picture. One of the other things to consider is the placement of the person behind the desk. The most approachable position is one in which you are kind of centered and looking up. You can also stand up as another way of indicating to people that you've seen that they've come near you, as in figure 1, where the person is standing up, makes a little bit more approachable. And then the third thing is to add that verbal greeting, right? You don't have to stand up. You don't have to do any of those things, but I would say that if you're picking 2, eye contact, direct eye contact to the person, and a verbal greeting, whatever seems natural to you. May I help you? It could just be hello, good day, whatever it is that you normally would say. So that's what my research on that had revealed. Also, one of the things that we're seeing here, I call this cautionary tales and staying safe, is that we're seeing a lot of libraries that are now opening up. There's one, Kentucky here, Chicago, and another from Texas, where they are not allowing people to have access to some of the things that they had before, including, in this case, the book drop, the actual stacks with the book stock, and in some cases, some of the computers, or maybe sometimes every other computer. It's a very different kind of feel to the library. And also from that New York Times article of just Monday, one of the quotes from that article is that this is awful because it's the opposite of what we normally do. And this was from Karen Keith, the executive director of the Hinsdale Public Library, which is just outside of Chicago. We want to be the community living room. We want everyone to stay and get comfortable, and to design service to prevent lingering and talking is so different from everything we've worked towards, right? And so here's a couple of other shots of what happens when we have to take these socially distancing measures. And you can see in figure 3.1 where they have demarcated 6 feet so that when people are going to be queuing up, that they queue up on the lines. Also, a lot of furniture has been removed, and here's a shot from Texas showing that in this case, every fourth computer is, or every third, I guess, computer is being able to be accessed. So this kind of cuts down on how much, actually, how many people can be in there, with the idea of trying to limit people from needing to be together in any kind of a close range. Also, we have more careful handling of the book stock. When we're going to be shelving books and having books paged, which probably in all of your libraries you've never done, where instead of allowing the visitors into the book stacks, instead they have to request the book and then it gets delivered to them. This is actually very staff. It takes a lot of staff time, and in many cases people are having to wait 24 hours or so forth, place a reservation on a book and then wait for it. This other thing shows with the bins in figure 4.2, where books are being returned and then they're being quarantined for 72 hours before anyone touches them, to make sure that they're not going to communicate the virus, right? I know I heard from Ellen that you've been doing click and collect. Click and collect in the United States, we're kind of calling it curbside pickup. This is the idea that people can reserve books ahead of time and then come. And in some cases, they can back their car up and the books can be put directly in their trunk, or sometimes they're passed over a counter in plastic bags and so forth. It does also mean, the reason that figure 5.1 is in there from Titusville, Florida, is to show that behind the scenes with click and collect, there's a lot of service activity, but it is kind of silent and very quiet because the users aren't allowed in the building yet. I will share with you that in New Jersey, our governor is allowing libraries to open up for click and collect started this Monday, but they are not allowed to have any visitors in the building yet, and he hasn't announced when he's going to allow that. Depends on how the virus goes. This also, in figure 5.1, you see these very big sheets of plexiglass that are going the whole length of the service desk. This looks like it's probably a combined circulation desk and also reference desk. However, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to hear, especially if you have older visitors who might be a little bit hard of hearing and so forth. So we'll have to just be aware. One of the things I'm going to talk about later on is how we need to be a little more patient and understanding with different people's to accommodate people who may have different impairments. Okay, so focusing on reference services. And what Ellen asked me to do for you all today is to give kind of a brief overview of some of my ideas about what is the core of reference service. We're going to talk a little bit first about kind of general reference and face-to-face reference, and I'm going to also talk a little bit about virtual reference. I know that the libraries after COVID, during COVID, have experienced a greater uptick in some of the virtual reference types of modes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And toward the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what do you do when people get cranky. And I know that some of the people who will be visiting your libraries as you open up and see more traffic are going to be cranky for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So to focus on reference service, the traditional services that we've had below these many years, face-to-face at a service desk and a phone service, usually staffed at the service desk. And then now things are starting to look like they've been around a long time. Email, I almost am starting to put email up with traditional service. It started in the 1990s, Actually, I had my first BitNet account in 1989. I remember getting my email account very early and having 0 people to email to. I had to send myself email to be able to demonstrate it to my library visitors. So virtual reference is still the most prevalent among all of virtual reference, but coming up close behind it now is live chat reference. And then we're also seeing other modes such as texting, instant messenger, then social media through Facebook, etc., and also video reference through formats such as the Blue Jeans one that we're on today. So I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that I have been doing reference research for a long time. And so I have decided that my kind of calling in life was to figure out what would make for the best communication, the best success, and the best satisfaction of the people that we work with in reference work. I also want to pause and say here for a minute, I just learned about this today. I've been allowing myself to get out of the house for walks, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. One of the podcasts that I was listening today was from the name of the podcast is the Ultimate Health. And today they had on a guest who was talking about her book, which is called Do Nothing. Her Do Nothing book talks about how it is important for us not to be working 12-hour days and pushing ourselves constantly. And I have been experiencing myself the intensity of how it feels to work in like this way that I'm talking to you today. A lot of my work is on Zoom we use at Rutgers and so forth, and just the intensity of that work. And she says that all of us have to kind of take care of ourselves in this moment. And one of the things that she was talking about was something that is really nourishing to our health, and that is when we help other people. And she said there actually is a phenomena called a helping high. That is when we help someone else, we get a shot, she said we get a shot of dopamine that makes us happy. And I was, wow, that is what reference work to me, that's what it's about, and that's why I love it, because I get high on helping other people. Right? And that's why we're here, because we're not in it for the money, let me tell you. I know that we're not in it for the money. So what do we want? We want to have the most successful encounters that we can possibly have. I want the biggest shot of that dopamine that I can possibly get. And what does that mean? That means that we want to make the best of our encounters. We want to have good encounters. We want to be able to feel satisfied at the end of that encounter that we've helped that person at the other side of the reference desk, whether it's a physical desk or a virtual reference desk. What is it that we can do to make the quality of that encounter better? And that's what I've been studying my whole life. So I have up here the book, and what we've done is write about the research that I've done, and also Catherine Ross and Kirsty Nielsen, about what it is that makes for that best success. And then I have also down there another book I just recently published that's all about interpersonal communication in reference, library conversations with my husband, Marie Radford, who's a communication expert, and then also my 2 grant projects, which I got a lot of money from the IMLS to study this. And we did a really extremely in-depth examination of particularly the interpersonal dimensions, but also the content dimensions, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So what did we discover? I've discovered that relationship building is key. And the relationships that we form with those our visitors, our users to the library, are what make for the best successful encounters. It doesn't mean that you might never even see that person again. You don't have to see that person again. As a matter of fact, I'm sure there are some people that come into our libraries that we never want to see again, right? However, in that moment, what we want to do is try to build a really good relationship with them. They will transfer that relationship, even if it's a fleeting encounter, to their opinions of libraries. Every other library they will ever encounter, every other librarian they will ever encounter. So it's really important, because when interactions don't go well, what happens to how we feel for the day? We don't feel good for the day when we've had an interaction that hasn't gone well, and we know the other person doesn't feel good about it. And probably they'll tell all their friends, is what the research shows. So one of the other things we learned is that there are two different views to what's happening in the reference encounter. So our library visitors, many times they come, and when I'm talking now, I'm talking about, it doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or virtual or on the phone, right? They come with a short-term objective. There's something that they need. There's some information they're looking for, or maybe it's instruction. They want to get that and get out. So that's that immediate gratification. They expect many times to use less effort than is actually required, and sometimes they can get impatient because they underestimated what they would have to do to get this information or to get this instruction or to figure out what it is that they need, right? And then they also tend to adore the technology and idolize it and think that there's just a button on Google where we can push it, push that full text button and they can get whatever they need just at their fingertips. And we know as professionals that that's not always possible, right? So on the other hand, the librarians and the staff, what's our view? Well, we have long-term objectives in each encounter. We're always trying to create the independent user. We want people to feel like they can find that information for themselves. So we're always kind of trying to go that extra help to give them some instruction. So we see more often an instruction opportunity than possibly that visitor wants. My advice there is, if they don't want the instruction, just give them the information, right? And then you can always say, do you want to know how I found that? And if they say yes, then you have a teaching moment, right? Up to that point, you're just helping them find that information on the spot. You want them to be satisfied. Don't force too much instruction. They wind up unhappy, right? And also, the librarian and library staff, we do expect good attitude and good effort. This is their work. This is their homework. This is their thing that they're in here looking for. Why aren't they going to give us all that 100% of their effort? Right? So we have these kind of dichotomy in the way that people view this encounter, and I would say that sometimes our goals are different. I found this out in my dissertation work, which I published in the Reference Encounter, my first book, all the way back in 1999, I guess it was. Right? I found out that there were two different goals, and this is what this chart is talking about. What are our objectives? What are our goals? Now, I want to also talk just very briefly about some communication theory. So in communication theory, there is a group of researchers that were working in California way back in the 1960s, the Palo Alto group, and they were all psychologists, and they were trying to figure out what makes for good human communication and figure out human behaviors and rules of behavior. They called them axioms of communication. Their book was called The Pragmatics of Human Communication. And what they did was they took a look at this, the conceptualization that was at that time of what was going on in communication. And so if any of you have ever studied any communication, you probably have seen this model. It's called the linear model of communication. You've got a source like me sending a message through my words, and you're just the receiver over there. And so you can see this, it's unidirectional, meaning that when I'm speaking to you, I'm just pouring all my knowledge into your head. Well, if you think about it for 1 second, you understand that that's not what's happening here. You have your own ideas, about reference. Many of you have a lot of experience. I looked, it looks like there's quite a bit of experience in the group that I'm talking to right now, many, many years, and in all the different modes and so forth. You know that when you tell someone something, a lot of times that message isn't received. There can be a miscommunication, there can be a misunderstanding. Sometimes you have to have a little feedback to find out, is this what you meant, and so forth. So now the current view is that meaning encounters are negotiated between people right at that moment. It's not a direct meaning. And so from this, Wadsworth, Beaven, and Jackson came up with one of their axioms of human communication, which was that every communication has both a content and a relational dimension. And this is one of the key points of my talk to you today. What does this mean? I have to remember to breathe occasionally. I also have my cup of green tea. Green tea fights COVID. Okay, what does this mean? Dual dimensions. Well, what Wadsworth, Beaven, and Jackson had to say about this was that every encounter has that content dimension, which is the what, the information that is being exchanged. Okay, so if you're trying to communicate some information to one of the visitors in your library, you have a particular piece of information that you're trying to convey. The other side of it, the other dimension, is the relational dimension. The relational dimension tells us how to interpret that message. How is that message to be taken? And it has to deal with the relationships of those participants, right? So for a very, very quick example, if you were in a classroom, let's put us all in a classroom, and what the teacher said to you, and you're a student, close the door, right? And you're sitting very close to the door, right? You would interpret this as a command. You would get up and you would close the door, right? So the content there is the words close the door. The relationship would be, in that circumstance, teacher to student. And as a student, you would do whatever the teacher asks you mostly. There's a lot of power there, right? So that's a very simple example, but let me give you an example of how the relational dimension works. Now, you're in your boss's office. Your boss has just called you in for a little talk. You're sitting across the desk from them, and after talking for a few minutes, your boss pauses and says, would you mind closing the door? Now, here we have the exact same content, a request to close the door. But now, when our boss says it to us in the context of a meeting in their office, immediately that takes on a different meaning because of the boss and the subordinate relationship. Okay? So that's a little bit of an example. Now, what does this mean in reference? What this means in reference is the key to a successful reference encounter of all of my research is that you have to pay attention to both the content and the relational dimensions. You have to know your stuff and be able to give that visitor the information they need, the instruction they need. However, you also must treat them with respect and have a good-natured encounter with them, right? You don't have to become their best friend, but there has to be a climate of mutual respect and compassion for them. And one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit in a few minutes is this idea of how much more compassion we actually need these days. So when we did all this research, we found out in order to have successful encounters, we had to understand what were the values of our library users, our library visitors. We found that, and this is from hundreds of interviews, of focus groups, doing deep transcript analysis. We had a lot of research, as I said, was funded by the IMLS over many years. We found out that the library users or visitors, they most highly value the librarian's attitude and personal qualities in reference encounters. Some of them told us they value these more than the receipt of the information they gave. Even if the information wasn't what they were looking for, they appreciated it when they had really good personal qualities and a nice attitude on the part of the librarian. So people would say, they didn't get the information I needed, but the librarian refreshed my skills. She taught me something new about the database. I really appreciated that, even though I didn't find what I was looking for. On the other hand, the librarians would talk about the content. So if I said, what's a successful reference encounter? They would say, one in which we found the right information, okay? And they were found also to value those relationship qualities, but to a little bit of a lesser degree. Okay, so that's why I said, kind of emphasizing this here to think about this relational side. When we look at what our professional organizations talk about as far as the component behavioral guidelines for reference, the American Library Association Reference and User Services Association, RUSA, came up with these guidelines, and they say that there's actually 5 behavioral components to the reference encounter. The first of these, and we've actually started talking quite a bit about this already, the idea of approachability and interest. This is extremely important for service excellence because people will decide whether they're even going to approach you at the physical desk or use your virtual reference service if they find those services to be approachable. In face-to-face encounters, it's mostly communicated non-verbally, and I've already talked about some of those positive things that you can do, such as eye contact, forward lean, standing up, and also adding the greeting, may I help you, or hello, or something. In virtual environments, it's communicated through text, which mostly is a re-representation of nonverbal behaviors. So you could type in ha ha or smile or so forth if you want to communicate humor. You can also use a variety of our emojis and emoticons, which are even getting more prolific by the minute. I love that guy with the little mask on here, right? And we find that nonverbal communication message are extremely powerful. The look that you give someone when they approach the desk, if it's face-to-face, or whether you look up from your computer screen or you don't look up from this computer screen, if you pull away from somebody who comes toward you rather than leaning forward and so forth, we make powerful instant judgments right on that spot. And so do our library visitors about whether or not they want to approach us. The more diverse your user base is, the more nonverbal differences you're going to see. And we know that nonverbal behavior differs for different cultures. So it behooves us to kind of learn more about the nonverbal behavior of the different groups in the communities that we serve. Okay. So, so these positive nonverbal behaviors, as we talked about earlier, immediately acknowledging the user, and this is through either the eye contact, or it could be as subtle as just leaning slightly forward or turning your body toward them if you're sideways at a computer. But you can also, while people are talking, nod or indicate that the request is being understood. You can use sympathetic noises like whatever seems to be normal. Also, it's about holding your head up and having a cheerful, again, it would be maniacal to just smile all the time, but, having a pleasant expression on your face. And we talked about the forward lean. The second part of the RUSA guidelines has to do with negotiating the question. This is kind of tricky, especially for those of you who may have not had a lot of experience. We know that sometimes the first question they ask is not the real question. And so we kind of encourage people to use more open kinds of questions. Tell me more about topic X. What would you like to know about X? And then once you get a little bit of a better idea, then you can move to your closed questions, such as, do you want a book or an article, right? I said that I was going to talk a little bit about when people get a little cranky. We have one technique that's called active listening if people are upset. This is where we kind of give full attention to the person who's speaking. And again, our full attention is given by those nonverbal cues like eye contact, your expression on your face, and so forth. And then you respond with empathy. So if someone is upset because they wanted some material that's not available, first you have to say, I'm really sorry, I can see that you're upset. Or you could even say, I'm sorry, thank you for bringing this to our attention, and so forth. And you can then focus on the problem. So that little bit of empathy, I can see that this is really difficult for you, or it looks like there's a reason why you need this so urgently. Can we talk about some alternatives and so forth? That can all work with active listening. And the idea is to hear what's the emotion that's going on besides just the request. Are people feeling frustrated? Are people feeling stressed out? You know, what's actually going on? The third aspect is effective searching. And again, I was saying that we have to also have that content down pat as well. And a lot of times that involves how we're going to look for the information that's needed, or how we're going to involve the user in the search, which means asking them for possible search terms, inquiring what it is, if anything, that they've had time to do. You know, what have you already had a minute to do? Have you had a chance to get started? And so forth. So you're negotiating your understanding of the query and then discussing with them possible search strategy. If all things fail and you can't find the information that they're looking for, make a good referral. And we talk a lot about this actually in the conducting the reference interview, because what this means is that you have to make sure that where you're pointing them is actually going to be the right referral. So unmonitored referral is something that we don't want to do. And I'll explain that in a minute. The end part is the follow-up, where it's really important, as we started the encounter on a positive note with a positive greeting, we also end on a positive note. Have I completely answered your question? This turns out to be one of the most important indicators for a successful encounter. Has the librarian, the library assistant, ask the person if they're satisfied, and then invite them to return to the desk or the online service if they need further help, avoiding negative closure. So negative closure is talked about by the work of Ross and Dudney that was published in the 90s. They sent out a bunch of reference students to ask some reference questions, and they found out that negative closure was happening, where they were making an unmonitored referral, which is when they're sending them to another department where the information is not, or implying that the user should have done something else, or trying to get the visitor to expect something that's easily found rather than that information. Okay, so in addition to all of that going on, among the times of COVID-19, we also have an extra layer. What do our visitors want right now? Well, one of the things they need is access when working from home and homeschooling, and access not just to materials, but also to our help. They also want convenience, right? Whether that means having something click and collect or so forth. This is really important to them right now. They want also that range of options for reference help, whether it's by phone or email or live chat or so forth. The increase of our virtual reference services is driven by our shelter at home, more people working at home, and the online education, homeschooling, and our growing demand for ebooks and e-reference collections. Now, there is some good news about this increase in virtual reference, which is that it's very similar to face-to-face reference, and we already have a lot of these skills, right? Some of the similarities I have listed here. You know, we're still building relationships, we're still answering questions, negotiating those questions with that service excellence as a goal. However, there are some differences that are challenging in live chat versus face-to-face reference. And one of them is that we don't have those nonverbal cues. We can't see what the person looks like, so we kind of have to make some educated guess, right? We have limited knowledge of them, and sometimes we also can encounter technical problems, especially if they don't have a really good online connection and so forth. Like face-to-face, we have identified a bunch of positive behaviors in live chat. A lot of it is the same kind of thing. A greeting. So usually if somebody types something into a text box, instead of just saying, I'm looking at your question right now, you can say hello, right? Hi, how are you even? Is not a bad thing to do in these times. And so using inclusive language is very important. Let's look at this database. What do you think? What have you, as I said, what have you already accomplished, if anything, and so forth. Word contact, you just can't leave them alone for too long in a live chat kind of setting. And our goal there is to build that rapport that through our politeness rituals, please and thank you and so forth, hello, goodbye, using our sense of humor and making also a very positive farewell. So one of the things that we learned is that when people are doing virtual reference, there is a tendency to kind of hit send after Googling something or finding something before we actually review it to see if a specific question was answered. And we found that you could very much increase the accuracy of virtual reference by like 30%. If you just make sure that whatever it is you're going to send, before you hit the send button, that you have made sure that that thing is actually giving the specific information. So if they're asking for the longitude and latitude of the Great Wall of China, don't send a tourist site for the Great Wall of China that doesn't have the actual longitude and latitude. That comes from actually, a specific example. So getting back to kind of more general face-to-face and virtual environments, what about when people were cranky? And I said that I was going to just talk about this right here in the kind of the concluding kind of minutes of my talk right here. I call this positive approaches to problematic people. One of the strategies that I've used is this kind of acronym where we take the last approach for difficult interactions. We listen, and I already discussed a little bit about what is active listening look like, and thinking about the empathy of how what the person is experiencing and so forth. Apologize even if it's not your fault. I'm very sorry we don't have this material for you today. It may not be your fault at all, but we have found that through research, and mostly in the business environment, that apologizing can diffuse up to 75% of someone's anger. They're just looking for someone to listen to what they have to say and then apologize. And then actually also the S is solve the problem. And a good strategy is to give alternatives if there aren't, something's not available. One of the examples from my research was a woman who was looking for a Harry Potter book. It was not in, and there was a long list of people on the wait list, but the audio version of that book was available. This was at the New York Public Library, and the person was happy with the audio version. So sometimes we can find different ways to solve the problem. And then thanking them, just like the apology, thanking people for if they brought a complaint to you regarding a complaint as a gift, and thanking them can be a really good strategy. One of the other things to think about is what if you have to say no, right? We can't always say yes. And as a matter of fact, some of the reading that I've been doing, the Library Journal article in particular that I referenced, and I have a list of references at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, they talked about being careful not to overcommit to people in this time of stress. So sometimes we There are things we can't do, and we have to say no, right? So remember, first of all, that people are stressed out to the max right now. There's a lot of emotional issues. People can have economic issues. Perhaps they lost their job, or someone that they know lost their job, or they have had significant relationship problems, perhaps during the time of isolation. People either, some relationships have been difficult. Your caregivers or people with small children at home, people can really be very stressed in this time. And so one of my really strong convictions is that in the library, too often we first jump to what I can't do. I can't do your homework for you. I can't do X, I can't do Y. And what I suggest instead is the idea of focusing on what you can do. Well, right now I can't do X, No. Say right now I can do Y and Z, right? So I think if we kind of turn that around a little bit, I think that would help even when we do have to say no and so forth. So the other thing is this idea of showing genuine regret. And one of the other techniques that I think is very useful is the broken record technique, being polite but firm in repeating no if it becomes necessary, if somebody really wants something that you can't do. One of the examples was about a woman who wanted her 8-year-old at a public library to go into an activity for children that was from 10 to 12-year-olds. And the mother was insisting that their 8-year-old was very mature, that could handle this. They played with the 10-year-olds and so forth. And so the broken record technique there works with, I'm sorry, this program is for 10 to 12-year-olds. Your son is 8, right? And you just keep saying that over and over again, and then they just run out of excuses. And then you can say, by the way, here, let me help you to look at the computer, or here's a list of resources that are age appropriate for 8-year-olds and so forth. Okay. So in all of this research that I've done, and I feel like I've been talking a little fast, but I really wanted to make a couple of really key points with you, and I'm feeling really happy that I have done that. Here's some of the things that we've learned. What do our users, our visitors, our readers, what do they want? They want interactions with friendly librarians. They want to build those relationships with librarians. Do you know that, when you think about what people want, we have there are very base needs that we have, right? For shelter, for food and water. But do you know right above that, the very next thing is the need for community and connections to people. And that's one thing that, especially in this COVID time, that people have been lacking, right? So these interactions with friendly people, really important. Of course, they also want extended hours of service and access to every bit of electronic information that's available on the planet, right? So sometimes we can give them and sometimes we can't. But these personal relationships we can give them. And it doesn't matter if it's by face-to-face or virtual, right? So what can we do? So we can think about and work toward building those positive relationships. We can understand more about our readers, our visitors, and how we can serve them better. We can also take care of ourselves in this time. Not only are our visitors stressed to the max, we also are stressed to the max. And I know I was understanding from Ellen and others, besides COVID, you've had floods to contend with and fires to contend with, and an awful lot of other natural disasters in addition to COVID that have really begun to feel like, it's really just all too much for people to take. So this is super important. What are our basic values? What is the reason that you even want to work in a library, right? Providing that equitable and excellent service to everyone. Understanding that this is important more than ever for us to provide that competent but also compassionate service. It's just what we've always done, but kind of even more so right now, right? And I wanted you to remember that relationships and communication are going to be critical for that success, but not just for their success, for your own satisfaction as well. So plus, there's something a little bit light. Don't forget to show your smile. The figure 6.1 from Belgium is for autistic children who need to see facial expressions. But on the right, these shields in America right now, more places and people are moving to the shields away from those just the masks, because it protects. It not only does it protect both the wearer and the person, the other person, but also you can see people smiling. And in closing, I'd like to say that I want to end with one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is one of my favorite writers. You know her as an American poet, author, and civil rights activist who published an amazing, astounding 7 autobiographies. She has, there's so many different quotes from her that are just so unbelievably inspiring to me. And right now, in America, we've been having great difficulties with our tensions over the brutal police brutality that people of color in our country have been experiencing right now. And I was kind of turning to Maya Angelou for a little bit of kind of to get some compassion from her and from some of the things that she's written. Here's something that always sticks with me. She said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that's really the whole message of my talk with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. That was great. There were certainly a lot of ideas to think about. Now, there was a question that came through, and please, other people, please put your questions in chat. Sam has asked, could you share some tips on helping students when a guardian or a parent is taking over the, my chat has just slipped up again. When a parent or guardian is taking over the interaction and not letting the student speak, but also kind of trying to go down the wrong pathway so that the student actually isn't going to get the information that they need.
Yeah, that's very tricky kind of, that's one of those sticky wickets, I think, right? Because you want to make sure that you're retaining a good, positive relationship with the parent, but you also are building a strong relationship with the child as well. One of the tips is to kind of try to talk directly to the student themselves. Now, it's also difficult because depending on the age, what is the age grouping? I'm not sure what your question, which age grouping, but for very young children, you can actually bring them over to the shelves. It actually will work with older students and even adolescents, where you walk with them over to the shelves, and the parent can keep talking, but then you're kind of helping them to say which one of these is something that might this be something that you're interested in. If it's above their reading level, that sometimes you need the parents there to actually help interpret that material. I would say to try to look at engage the parent in saying, we're going to help your son or your daughter together to figure this out. Let me start by asking him a few questions, right? Like that. I think that can actually help.
Yeah, and the question was clarified that it was probably more teenagers.
Yes. Yeah. Teenagers are really very difficult. I have to share with you that I worked as a high school librarian for 4 years with the teenagers, and they can be really, really difficult because a lot of what they're going through right then is a lot of personal growth. And so sometimes that looks like they could be very belligerent and so forth, but a lot of times on one-on-one, they're actually quite timid and they have a lot of insecurities, right? If the parent is there with the teenager, I would actually say, you could even make a little joke, I think this is between me and your daughter, can you excuse us for a few minutes to just talk about it? We're going to sit over here. And then you take the person to sit down and, say, there's a great exhibit on blah, 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 new books out in the lobby, you might, and kind of almost dismiss them. And usually the teenager will be very grateful. If you can do it, you have to kind of use your sense of humor there. Don't be afraid of the teenagers. Sometimes they look really scary with their, tattoo, rings, earrings, and strange, black, garb and whatever, maybe strange hairdos and whatever. But they're really not very scary once you get to know them a little better.
Okay, sounds like the person has been using a similar technique, but there's apparently some particularly some parents in particular who will not be separated. So that's kind of a tough one if you've got to manage both of them. Do you kind of make a call and go, actually, it is the child's question. I'm going to really have the teenager's question. I'm really just going to have to prioritize them. And
I think, if you've tried this, I need to discuss this individually, with your son or daughter. Would you excuse us or something? And they have directly said no. I mean, I think that would be really hard if you looked them in the eye and you said, I really have to talk to your son or daughter about this. Could you excuse us for a few minutes? If we need you, we'll call you. And if they say no at that point, you're probably not going to get anywhere. I would give up. I hate to say that. The helicopter parenting thing has been getting much worse recently, as I think because parents are really worried about their children succeeding in school to greater degrees than they ever had before. But the other thing you could do, I have a lot of techniques about about working with bullies. You could maybe consider that parent is trying to bully you, if you feel that way, and treat them like you would a bully, and say things like, hey, your bottom line is you want your kid to succeed. I'm there. We have to, but in order for that to happen, I have to work with your son directly right now. So sort of something like that might work. Read up on the literature on dealing with a bully. It sounds like that's the problem there. I don't want to, I'm conscious of the time, and I don't know if there are other questions.
But I think that's definitely an interesting angle to just actually call them as a bully but deal with them within all your work requirements around that to help the client.
One of the things that, Ellen, just one other thing just occurs to me in that, because this is true of all reference work too. And I think of it this way sometimes. I will bend over backwards to help you, but I won't lay down on the floor and let you walk on me. So sometimes you do have to become a little more assertive about asking for that private time with the person. But in some cases, if they just won't, you just have to do the best you can. And in that case, I would just continue to make eye contact with the child. And if it's a teenager, you're making eye contact with them. You're talking directly to them. Don't turn your head and start talking directly to the parent. See if that works. I don't want to start World War III. Sorry, there was another question?
Oh, just checking. I don't think I've missed another question. It's mainly people are commenting on how much they enjoyed the session. There's a very steady stream of thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
One of the things I know about these Zooms is people get a little, there's some fatigue that sets in, when it comes toward the end.
But really, it sounds like it was a very, I enjoyed it. But, it's not about me enjoying it. It sounds like it was a very practical session for other people as well. Yes, so really no questions? Okay, it seems like everyone is fine. They don't need to have questions. That's all good. Thank you so much for that session. And please don't forget, I'm doing a shameless plug again. The book is available with unlimited simultaneous loans until the end of June. Oh, yes, someone did comment on the cat earlier, and I missed seeing the cat. So I've just seen the cat wander through.
Oh, my cat?
Yes, your cat.
My cat. I have two cats, yes. Smokey.
It's a darkish, yes, probably Smokey.
Yeah, Smokey. They run around behind me a lot of times, but yeah.
Yes.
I want to also apologize that I felt like I was talking a little bit fast. So I hope that it was just for me trying to get everything in. I had little notes in my slides to try to keep myself, and I was pretty happy that I ended right on time. Can I just share my screen, Ellen, for one more second, because I had been telling everyone that I had the screen with the resources on it. And if you want some extra reading material, these are some of the things that I was citing, and also the citation for my book and for the Wong and Saunders reference textbook. That's a new textbook. And so that will be for those of you who, when you get your, did it stop sharing, Alan?
Yeah, it stopped sharing, but we saw it. And I just was thinking that I'm going to suggest that new textbook as a possibility for indie reads. No promises to people, but we'll see if we can get it. Just because it's helpful to be able to get more access to it than otherwise.
Yeah, that's the one that was done for years by Linda Smith. So it's one of the best reference textbooks that there is, and they just did this new edition in 2020. Each chapter is edited, and you can just dip in to the different chapters if you're interested. Particularly, I think for people without a lot of reference experience, it might be a super helpful to just learn some basic stuff about, you know, the different types of questions and the different types of resources and so forth. So. Okay, well, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, so thank you so much. This was fabulous. An email will be going out to the listeners today because we'll have Neil Radford in July on Readers Advisory work. And I will
Neil, yes, I have met him, but we're not related.
Yes, that's right. It's kind of like we've got the Radford series, isn't it?
Give him my regards. I have met him. I've introduced myself to him at a conference saying, hey, we have the same last name.
That passed me by entirely. And there'll be a short evaluation of today's session, but that's mainly to help us in PLS do our part of this better. So thank you all very much for coming on, and really a huge thank you, Marie. That was fabulous.
I would love to get to meet all of you in person sometime. I've never been to Australia. It's one of my dreams. So
well, hopefully that will be possible sometime.
Yes. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks again, Ellen, for inviting me.
Thank you.
I'm just going to stop recording.